Go. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining a session of Revit Radio. I am Brian Mackey. Below, above, around me somewhere is our beautiful host, co-host, Melissa Thiesens. So thank you, everybody. She's just got back yesterday from a well-worked trip at Built, where she is on the committee, and she does crack the whip for all of us slacky speakers. No, Melissa, I still haven't put my PowerPoints up there. So she's a little bit, I just finally got back from that thing. And, for those of you who do know what Built Conference is or don't know what the Built Conference is, I just want to give a shout out to them, because being behind the scenes, as my wife is the chairperson, I know how hard the people had to work this year because there was no staff to actually help them. So it was pretty much put on this year 100% by all volunteer work and no paid staff. So thank you for all of them.
We had like 2 marketing people.
2 marketing people. There you go. At least
But
they were
yeah, the
marketing.
rest of us are just suckers.
Dedicated to their profession.
Yeah,
AKA suckers.
Yeah,
sounds way. So for those of you, I see a lot of new names here. Hopefully some of you actually came from Revit Radio or came from Built for Revit Radio, because I did shamelessly plug it in all 5 of my sessions. Hopefully you guys are here from that. But if you don't know how this actually works, you guys ask questions and I answer them. The one thing we do ask is, if you do put the questions in the question and answer pod with Melissa and myself, it's really easy. It's much easier for us to keep track of them there, because as chat comes in, it scrolls to the top and we might not ever scroll back up and find it. So if you do have questions, please put those in the questions and answer pod. It'll make our lives much easier. I am coming to you live from Holden Beach here. I will show the screen if we get it there. So I'm coming to you, that's a house, that's the river. I'm coming to you live from Holden Beach because I'm on technically vacation right now. So I figured she'd be working the Built Conference and she needs some relaxing time after that. So I'm working from here. I don't work from home, I work from here. So wherever here is, that's where I work. So that's where I'll be coming from. So if you see me look out the window and get sidetracked, it's usually because there's like dolphins or something swimming around in the intercoastal. So with that said, I'm going to start off with one thing that during my presentation on the what's new in Revit structure, I was talking about filters. I'm going to actually go ahead and open that up. There's the sample structure project. And I thought it was funny because I was just talking about filters and somebody asked the question, what is that filter there? And I explained it, and every single person in the room took a note on this. So I figured this is probably something that's deserving of a blog post. I have not got that far yet, but I will at least show it here on Revit Radio. And the thing on this one is I love filters. I know Melissa uses a crap ton of filters. She always has, definitely with the way with working with Parallax, they use a crap ton. Is a ton a big enough word for how many filters Parallax uses, or is it more than that?
I think it's a metric crap ton.
Metric crap ton. There we go. So it's even more. But on that, we always describe filters are a filter is nothing more than a query into the database, right? So a filter says, hey, I am going to go look into the database and I want to find what's going on in that database. So I am going to first off go in and turn off the site link. Something happened like on any other project where the stupid site link file got put in at the very end and it showed up on every single view. So I'm just going to go ahead and unload that one. Unload that one. Cool. Yes. Okay. Go away everywhere. I don't want to see you. And then in this view, I am going to go turn on the Revit link for the mechanical files. VHVAC. So the reason why I'm turning this on is you can see inside of mine, and this is something, like I said, I did bring it up and everybody's like, oh my God, how did you do that? Often I get a complaint from everybody talking about every time I link in the MEP, all of their stuff is in color. Why is their stuff all in color? Well, I have one in here for my MEP classification. I'm just going to go disable the functionality, right? Because MEP has different rules, right? Hey, it's blue if it's return error, or it's red if it's hot, it's blue if it's cold, if it's supply error versus return error. All of these different rules to color code it so they can understand what a round duct is, right? Unfortunately, that does come through into all of our link when we link it in. So one of the things for me is I create a filter to do this. And honest truth, this is the only way I know how to do this from the linked file without having to go in and manually override linked files. I created a filter for this. So for me, if I come over here and I look at this, and I know I have a couple of MEP folk on here, you might tell me I'm missing a category. but I have one down here called MEP, and I called it system classification. So basically what I did on this filter is I created a filter and I assigned it to all of the MEP stuff that I could find, and there might be more in 24. Since I did this, I created this probably in like 21. It has a property called system classification. So the way these things are color coded in the MEP file is they're using the system classification. Even if they're not, I don't care. In the MEP file, they have a value called system classification. And what's great about system classification is it has to have a value. So you cannot create a piece of duct or a piece of pipe without saying what that system classification is. It's going to have some sort of classification that makes sense in the MEP world. Doesn't necessarily make sense in my brain, but it makes sense in there. So all I have to do is say, hey, is that value greater than blank? They cannot leave it blank. So therefore, Revit will always select it. And again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I have no problem. I don't know everything about the MEP information, so I could totally be speaking wrong. But this has always worked for me. So anything that has a system classification, I did grab all the categories that I thought had it. Like I said, I might have missed some. There might be actually like duct insulation now. No, I actually have that up there. I'm gonna say when I created this, I couldn't remember if it was there or not. But all of those things that say, hey, this is just saying, hey, if that classification is greater than blank. Now what I can do is in my view templates or in each individual view, I can come down here and say, ooh, let me go ahead and take that filter, let me add it. And in my case, I turned it red, but in reality, I usually come in here and say, hey, let's just make all of it black. I don't usually change the line weights. I don't usually change the line color or the line patterns. I just say, hey, make everything black for me and we're good. In this particular case, I did actually go into the patterns. I did want to be able to see them more. So I said, make it a solid color. I made it the same red. And that's how I get rid of all of the crazy blues. I don't know, they're not even like blues and reds, like off blues and off pinks, just so I could come in and start seeing what's going on with that. So yeah, just wanted to bring that out. If you can't tell, I'm actually vying for questions here because I don't see any questions in the question and answer pod. I do have one that was emailed to me, so we will jump into that one. But I do not technically have any questions. So I'm still sitting here trying to buy time. So that's just one of the ones. I literally did that and everybody's like, oh my goodness, I can now have all of that link stuff from MEP being black. This is crazy. I love having that. That was the note that I think everybody took when I was in this class talking. And again, 90% of them were structural, but there were still about 10% architecture and MEP people. And of course, the MEP people were in the room going, yeah, you didn't know you could do that? Man. Cool. So that's just what I wanted to start off with. That's what I came out with that thing. Hey, everybody wanted to know how the heck that happened. So I'm going to pull up my Snagit here because somebody did email me a question. And the question that came up is, and I'm going to go zoom in on this. The question came up of, how do I get in here to create a detail item or any sort of item that I can actually start creating and doing like curved scenario like this? And in reality, you're probably not going to be able to get one detail item that you can say, hey, has curve. I could probably do one that could do one. Like, hey, do one curve. Like in this case, this line here curves twice. This one here only curves once. There's going to be a lot of ways to go through and do two different elements. Like, hey, I might have to have one that has one curve, one that has a returning curve. You could probably, I could overcomplicate one that would do this, but it's going to start getting a little bit tricky and odd when you start getting into that. So the biggest thing that I was going to say, and somebody said, hey, I've attached the detail component. So I was going to open it. I have not looked at it yet because I was in civil chat right before this. So we're going to go open up this file and we'll see if I can look at the file and figure out what's going on there. Radio, it is the tendons file. Goodness. Oh, Revit screen is frozen. Oh, I clicked on something down below. I probably accidentally paused it. Thank you for saying that to me, Jason. There we go. So I will go back to the screen capture because you guys said you weren't saying it. So here on the screen capture, so it's a detail line in this case, but it's just a line that's either got one jog or a line that's got two jogs, right? I wish tendons is something that Autodesk would address because it's definitely one of those things where, yes, I get this question from every single one of my structural engineering firms that do concrete. So one of the things on that, this is just a line-based component. I'm just going to go in here and hide this category and hide this category. So you can kind of see they've got lines that can turn them on and off. like I said, I don't think you're going to be able to create one that allows you to do this, and one that allows you to be straight, one that allows a jog, one that allows a second jog. And the only reason why I'm thinking that that would not be possible, just simply in the fact that since we're going to add curves to this object, those curves, we're going to have to come in, and you can't make a curve in a regular family go straight. So we can do it if it was an adaptive component family, but we can't do that when it's just a regular family that goes straight. So one of the things I was going to say, if you're trying to just do this with a detail item, is literally it's just going to be taking some other reference planes in here. And I'm totally doing this horribly, but you guys can forgive me. And all I was going to say is creating a reference plane up here and giving yourself an offset value for that reference plane. You're then going to have to start coming in here and giving yourself like length values for what is the length of this first leg, what is the length from the second leg. I would dimension those opposite from the ends. And then you're going to have to, and I'm just going to, again, doing this horribly because I'm not actually coming in here and I'm just trying to control drag. That must be the actual one. I'm going to put one here. I'm going to put one here. What I'm going to do is once I got that offset in there is I would go in and I would start doing a reference line between these four reference planes. There's already a reference plane on here. Could have been the wrong one, but you guys will get the gist of what I'm doing here. So when I'm creating this, I'm going to go ahead and do a reference line on this. And the reason why I'm doing this reference line is I can align and lock all of the endpoints. So I can align and lock that endpoint. I can align and lock, oops, I already did the vertical, this endpoint to here. And I can do it on both portions of this, right? Now that I've done that, I can draw a detail line and align it and lock it to this. Then you could do a fillet where you're going to fillet these ones. So I'm not going to go through the whole process here. Pull this dimension out, right? So then I can come down here. I'm going to go create a line, right? I'm just going to, fake this in here. We would be doing that. Why is my chain turned on? The chain was on. I got to come back and align and lock it. And its endpoint. And I would do another detail line here to here and lock that. And then I'd be filleting this. So if I go create another line, use my fillet arc. Fillet arc should be right there. We'll put a radius of like 1 inch on this. And just say, hey, go from here to here. The key thing when doing this then is just doing a tangent lock and a tangent lock here. So then if I start coming in here, you're in the project, you adjust this value to be whatever you want it to be, you start coming down and doing this, that's still going to maintain the tangent lock and start figuring out where that needs to go. So doing the tangent lock here and the tangent lock down here. But again, if I were to come back here and say, no, I wanted that value to be 0, it is going to blow up because it can't keep this line tangent and arc. Revit will not take a curve and make it go straight. So not able to do that. You could basically go in and put a user value in the, oh, if this is you can't do 0, but I could make this 1/32 of an inch. So maybe nobody would notice that you're going to have a jog. You'd have to figure out what that needs to be to keep this curve going. But you could make it some sort of value, and they're probably not going to be acceptable. So that's where I was saying, if it was me, I would just have one that's aligned, one that's got one jog, and another one that would then do that same jog coming. So unless anybody has anything other to say on that, it's basically how I would be doing this. And I'd add a flip control going the other way. So if you needed to mirror it after you drew it, you could do that as well. But yeah, there's been that holy grail trying to figure these things out of, gee, how do I do something like this? I've tried playing with like adaptive components and placing it and having like straight lines and then curved lines or just it as a spline, but it's really hard to maintain it, to keep it straight if you're doing it as a spline. I've tried a whole bunch of different ways, and basically a simple detail component like this with the offset and just tangent arcs is how I've accomplished this. And again, just different families, a straight, a double curve, or curve back, you could call it. You can make that just be the same. I have found actually that most of my structural engineers actually just export out of their analytical program these lines to DWG, and then they link into DWG specific to the tendon view only. And then what they end up doing, similar to what you see here, is just adding Revit tags. So it's a Revit thing that they put at the end of all of the DWG lines that also has the data you're looking for here. So that would be the other alternative. But if you don't want to bring in that DWG theory, that's your native Revit stuff. So Nick, that came from you. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it kind of goes into Chris's. Would you recommend doing tendon layout plans as detail lines or items, or do you model tendons? So that kind of.
Yeah, the whole modeling of the tendons was the theory of why I did it as an adaptive component, because then we could go through and get that tendon modeled in there. This is one of those ones to me that it's always hard to say yes or no, because yes, I would love to have these modeled, but this is one of those things that even if you model it, it's not going to really be where it is. You're still going to have to use ground penetrating radar if you ever want to cut a hole through there. Sure, it would be nice, but I also sometimes feel like these types of things add additional conflicts or construction issues, constructability issues. When it's literally a tendon, they can be shifted and moved around things by a given inch or so. It's just kind of go around them. So for me, in that scenario, yeah, if you could try to model them, you could technically do the same thing with a 3D line-based object. If you really wanted to do this, model it in 3D, just use the 3D line-based object as opposed to the detail item line-based, and then just post it to the top of the slab, and then you could have the actual sweep that you would be modeling this off of just be hosted down however far you want to go down. So you could say, hey, let me just put this on top of the slab. Let me draw this same exact scenario, but this would be a sweep rather than detail lines. Sweep a little circle on that path, and you could model it 3D. And since it's line-based families will always pick up on a host unless you say otherwise. So you could technically even host it to the slab if you wanted to. So yes, Chris, if you wanted to, go to town. It's literally not going to be any different if you're going through and drawing them all. And then it might be nice to have it. Up to you if you then want to do the 3D connections for the beginning and the end of the tendons. And you would still nest in your symbols. So you would still come in here and nest in these symbols, and these symbols would be set to, only see these in like a coarse level of detail. And then you could also, in your visibility graphics, say, hey, only see those in a coarse level of detail, because they're stuff that's nested in. And in this case, it is a 2D symbol. It's a generic annotation. So you would see the symbol in plan, but then the 3D object in 3D.
So exciting.
Nick says, yeah, that gives them some other ideas. So cool. What else we got there, Melissa?
Let's see. Just see if there's any that slightly follow on with that. Oh, kind of back to the filters thing, Bud's saying, is it only mechanical and plumbing that requires system classification? I use multiple filters, so I can also include electrical, such as light fixtures, to differentiate between the electrical model and architectural model.
So it was funny. I don't know if this broke in 24. I tried this the other day in 24 and I could not get it to work, but I used it when I was creating this file. We created it in Revit 23. But one thing I actually do often is when you start linking in projects, elements, and you have work sets, what used to happen with the link is I would always move my links to a work set called, Revit links or Z Revit link, MEP, Z Revit link, whatever. And so I used to create a filter that said anything on the Z that begins on the work set Z level. And when you're doing a filter, this doesn't have work sets enabled, so I can't show it. When you're doing a filter, you can grab every category, and the only property that comes up when you grab every category is work sets. So I basically said Revit work set begins with Z link. And part of the reason why I did this, and I actually learned this during somebody I was working with, they did this for everything. The real reason why I was doing it is I then set all my Revit links to be really thin line weight. So even if I come into like a floor plan and I have those link miles in the floor plan, come down here to the working plans. Even if I go in and set those up, the linked models still have the fat line weights. So I can say, hey, make those all half toned, but they all have fat line weights. So the half tone fat line weights half the time are graying out my stuff. But when I was able to go in and say, hey, find the work set that begins with Z Revit, because that's what I call my linking work sets, then I could say, hey, add that filter, make everything be a line weight of 1. So I could basically put all of my links into a thin line scenario. That did not work for me the other day in 24, and I've not tried getting into it. So I don't know, I guess maybe I could just go enable work sharing here. We'll try it real quick. Work sets. I'm so not used to all these new icons at the bottom of the screen. Sure, levels and grids, work set 1. Yeah, so I use that all the time in 23 and prior, and I just do working client the other day in 24, and I don't know if I was just not paying attention. New link. I can call this one link. Hey. No. The thing I also tell people is when you're working with links, I always see people trying to tab select and try coming around all of the days trying to grab their linked files. Do you realize you can always just come in the project browser and say, hey, let me select all the links in the entire project? One reason I like doing it this way is I often do this in clients' projects, and I find that they have two. Like somebody was copying something and they copied a second version of that thing inside of there. And you're kind of like, dude, did you realize that you copied that over there twice? Also, the thing to take into consideration is linked Revit files have an instance-based work set as well as a type-based work set. So if you are changing link files to a linked work set and you didn't have that work set active when you link them, just do realize that you can change it here. This is the instance base, but you also have the capability to have a type-based work set as well. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is this is for like multifamily stuff. So if you've got somebody, or we use this quite often, but in multifamily, we'd have a typical unit A, right? And unit A might be linked into the project 400 times. I don't need to see it 400 times. So I could put it in there called unit links, and that's the type work set. Then each individual link, if I wanted to, I put them on like level 1 links, level 2 links, level 3 links. So I could control which links I was seeing via work sets or opening the project if I knew that day I was going to be working on level 1. So you can have instance versus type based when you load your work sets or open your work sets upon working in Revit. You can also go through and do that as well. So manage view template, not view templates, filters. Filters, new links. We're just going to place it. And I literally would say check all. And then you will see in here, the only thing that comes up is work sets. I'm going to say contains, I think I had a capital L in that. We'll find out. Contains link. Why is this still grayed out? Oh, that's right. Check all. I hid behind on work set. So you can see only thing in there is work set. Say okay. And we'll see in here if I can get this to work in 24. Filters, add links. View. Let's just go take the lines and make them. Oh, and just for grand, let's go make them an olive color. You see, now this is not working. This used to work in 23. And it is a capital L. I did get my filter that way. So this used to work in 23. That literally was how I did this. And Bud's saying he's never been able to get this to work. Yeah, because it should look at this link first and turn everything there. And then it would, yeah, if I tab select and get the elements, and these elements don't even have work sets because it's not a work shared project. But it literally, when I was modeling this, granted everything had work sets, but yeah, that's what I did. And it came up and I tried this in 24 and I could not get it to work. Bud's saying he's never been able to get it to work, but so do everything that's not links. But Bud said he did it slightly different. Filters. Let me find my one called links. If I say doesn't contain, I can't make the ones that do contain. And let's try it as equals. So it has to equal exactly. So guess what? Contains doesn't work. It has to equal. So there you go. That's what I was doing wrong the other day. Guess I just got lucky before. So there you go, Bud. Does that work for you? Can't say contains. You have to say equal. So I guess you could create or equals, especially since we're in here. So if you had Z links, architecture, Z links, MEP, Z links, et cetera, in your filter, since we have the ors now, you could say it's an or rule and keep adding the rules. Oops, grab the right one.
All the rules.
Work set should be an or, add rule, or work set equals whatever the next one's gonna be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so that's a tip that I also use filters for, that I can kind of get these into thin lines, and therefore you can start to see that, oh, the gray stuff is gonna be on top of, but it's not covering, and it's not the same line weight, et cetera, as my stuff. So yes, I forget who that original question was from, saying about the electrical, plumbing, all of that stuff. I use filters all day long through linked files. I just do it all the time. Again, I don't want to see this here. They've got green, blue. This project in particular, since the files were still linked in here, there are some in here, like the architectural model had floors, had the inch mark in them. So I wanted to be able to turn off the
Hold on for a
architectural.
second. This is the structural, this is the new sample model.
Yes, in 2024.
And it really does say structural size on the filter.
Where are you? What did I screw up? Come on, Melissa. This is 100% me. Which one?
I know, that's why I'm mocking you with love.
Oh yeah. No one says Chuck Tool. Yeah, I missed an R in there. Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome.
I found so many spelling errors. Okay, final run through before we submit this. Found so many.
Oh
spelling
yeah,
errors.
it's always the minute you like hit go that you're like, oh man.
Oh man. Yeah. So same as So yeah, we're getting into that. Like, inch. A lot of these were here. Hey, the architect had ones where their names contained finish. I wanted to be able to turn the finish ones off, etc. So kind of one of those nice things that filters easily work through links. I use these all of the dang time to start going through and turning things on and off. Also, sometimes I might ask the architect, especially for MEP folk, a lot of the architects use filters to color code their walls. They might be using a custom project parameter, but if you actually have them, and I do this for a lot of my architects, I literally have a Revit file that has the parameters they have for walls, because you need those parameters. And then also has all the filters they use for all of their code walls. Like my client might have their own fire rating, code fire rating, or whatever it's going to be. And they assign that to doors, walls, windows, whatever they might be assigning it to. So I need that parameter in my project. But then I also have my architects have a file that's literally the project parameters that they use for that, as well as the filters. And then you can just import that across. You'll get all the filters they have. You'll get actually a view template, so you get the coding to it as well. And then you can just apply it. So you, as an MEP person, can start seeing all of the rated walls. But you do have to have, because most people are not using the out-of-the-box parameter, you do have to have in your file that shared parameter, that project parameter, whatever it is they might be using, into your file, just so it has to be there for the filters to look at it. Right? So filters work through links. Start taking advantage of them.
Definitely. Marta was asking if the work sets instance and type were a 24 feature, and then noticed that it is in 23. But I think the instance and type has been around as long as I can remember.
Always been there. I started Revit in 2004, version 7 something, and when it was there then. It's also there for CAD links. So if you had a CAD link in there, you could select your CAD link. This project doesn't have any, and you also have instance and type based CAD links as well. Technically, everything has an instance and a type based work set. Like if I were to grab this, it's not in my file. Let me grab something in my file, right? This structural column, it's on work set 1, but the structural column itself is a work set. You don't see it in here. You don't see it come up here and think about it all of the time, but the column itself, the family type, is a type-based work set. Because that's why when you're loading in a family, it says, oh, this work set is not editable. Would you like to make it editable? Because that work set, you haven't checked out the type work set for that family, right? So this is the work set that it is. It's the family is called W-shaped column, right? If I just cancel out of this, it's called W-shaped column. Every single element has a type and an instance-based work set. When Autodesk gave us the capability to schedule work sets, they're only scheduling the instance based. We cannot schedule the type-based work sets. I asked that question, like, we can schedule work sets in like instance or type. Like, what do you mean? Like, everything has 2 work sets. The instance
so basically just the user created is what we see, right?
Basically, yes, because the other thing on top of that, and you guys have probably seen this, if you're using any add-in utility, every view is its own work set. If you come down here to the work sets dialog box, not many users I discover ever see that there's 4 checkboxes down here. These are, they call them user created. These are modeling work sets. These are the work sets that the modeled elements go on. But if I uncheck that and come down here to families, every single family is a work set. Generic annotations, 3D, every family, these are type work sets or type-based work sets. Every view is its own work set. That's why you get the error warning. Oh, you can accept this design option, or I got to delete this tag. This tag is called view blah, 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 because the tag's instance-based work set is the view it's placed into. So every view, every sheet is a work set. All of your project standards are also a work set. So if somebody goes in to edit the analysis display style, they check that out. No one else can go currently edit the analytical display styles. Right? All the duck sizes, if you're an MEP person, somebody goes in, starts manipulating duck sizes, that person owns the duck sizes until they synchronize and relinquish their rights. They own that stuff. So it's not just the instance-based, these 3 ones down here are all type-based sets. Right? Which is the other reason why I always tell people, and this is going to be the same way. I got to save this file because I added work sets. Sweet. I don't want it in the sample file anymore. We'll go into the temp folder. Delete. Right. So once this saves, I'm currently the owner of every single element in this. Right. Not only the instance, but the type base. You can't even change the project information if you don't want to until I go to synchronize. So one of the big things to me is I had a client who, this one user always hit the synchronize now. The problem with synchronize now is it's cool. It does not open up this dialog box, which how many times you've hit synchronize, get up, walk away, go get coffee, come back 20 minutes later, and this dialog box sitting there is like, oh, son of a, I forgot to hit that. But the reason that I always tell people not to use the sync now is the synchronize now might not allow you to uncheck any of these things up here. Synchronize now does not automatically give up your rights. It remembers your last setting. And if my last setting was only checking user created work sets, but all of a sudden I took on project standards, I will still own the project standards. So synchronize now, I tell everybody do not use. Come in here and use the user created work sets. It's nice. You can the synchronize and modify. You can come in here and change all your settings and make sure you're giving up your rights to every single element. And if you're actually using like shared coordinates and you acquire shared coordinates, you take one of the project standard work sets out of it. I know this because I have several of my clients owned their standards and they can't go change the project name or anything like that too. So just be aware you do have that and make sure you're always going in and hitting that synchronize, not the synchronize now. What other questions we got here?
That might somewhat go into Dina's BIM 360 question. 2 of 3 users can't sync because they get a warning, can't edit element. It was deleted in central model. Do you know a workaround on that?
There's many reasons for that. One of the things in there, I don't know if that's on a BIM 360. Did that question say it was on BIM 360 or did it say if you're on a, so it's really, really fun. If it's on your server, you can go in and delete the backup folder. I'm going to come in here and show you. I just put that under, where did I put that on? BD Mackie, and then I put it under temp. So when you create a central file on your server, it creates a backup folder. That backup folder has a lot of data inside of it. If you delete the backup folder, the first person who opens it and they try to do anything, it'll tell you that element's been deleted. You can't move it. That element's been deleted. There's no version. There's no history of what's going on in this file. Who owns what's going on. So this backup folder has all of that data inside of there. If you delete that, the first person who opens it is going to freak out. They're going to be like, oh, you can't do this. And I say this because I had one client prior to them switching to BIM 360, they deleted these at the end of every month. So inevitably, first day of the month, first working day of the month, people come in, open up the file, it says I can't do anything, what's going on? Save the file. But it says I can't do it, save the file. Synchronize your file, but I can't. Synchronize. Now do what you're gonna do. But it works. So Revit will automatically create this. And what happens in this backup folder is there's all these things going on inside of here. One of them is the users.dat folder. This folder actually tells people if somebody has an element checked out or not. And there's like the work set permissions, if somebody have the work set checked out, a few of these DAT files inside of here, if they don't exist, Revit does not know what to do until you synchronize. And then it says, oh, let me regenerate all this stuff for you automatically. And there you go. So my client, at the end of the month, they run their backup utility. All the stuff gets copied. Actually, they copy all the stuff to the server, except any backup folder. Then they delete the backup folder and they're good to go. So it could be one of the reasons why it says element has been deleted. The permissions are just jacked up. If you're on BIM 360, your cache could be corrupt. It could be the fact that you're just losing packets of data when you're synchronizing to the BIM 360 site. So I actually found this about a month or two ago. If you guys have PyRevit installed, I'm in 24. There is no PyRevit for 24, but I don't have it up here. If you have PyRevit installed, one of the tools they have is to go delete BIM 360 cache. So there is a PyRevit utility for that. I personally have shortcuts to all the crappy little cache files I'm gonna need. Like, did you know Microsoft Teams has a huge cache file? So I was like, oh gee, I didn't know Microsoft Teams has a great cache folder. So you get in here, it creates a ton of crap in there. So I delete my Microsoft Teams cache. I have all these shortcuts on my desktop to go into those folders to delete. But the oops, it's not the one I wanted. That's the Revit UI. Where's the cache? Here we go. So I come in here to my Autodesk Revit, right? This is your cache. It might move in 24. 24, we finally have the capability to move where that cache is being stored on a user's computer. But prior to 24, it would come in here. And I always tell everybody, go delete your CF cache, go delete your collaboration cache. I go in and delete everything underneath the journals as well. If you're fearful of doing this, when you go into the collaboration cache, this is your Autodesk user ID behind the scenes. So that's me. Anybody wants to know that? These are then all the projects you're working on. Revit doesn't care about your project names. Revit doesn't care about your Revit file names. Behind the scenes, it's creating GUIs for everything. So if I start looking at this, you can see all these different projects in here. And if I double click one, not only is this then the Revit files I've opened natively in this project, these are then the linked models, the caches. I always tell everybody, if you can figure out which project it is, usually you can tell by date, delete that whole folder, try reopening up that file and see what's going on. Yeah, somebody's like, yeah, I played the GUI hunt down before to figure out which Revit file is rich. Autodesk is actually trying to come up with a way, at least on the home tab in Revit. They had said they were working on this. I'm not saying they're actually going to do it, but on the home tab in Revit, they were going to do something where you could like right click and see the GUI number, or if you just hovered over it, it would give you the GUI up there as well. They haven't done that yet, and I'm like, why? I would think that would be a really easy thing just to list the freaking GUI at the very bottom of this to tell me, hey, here's what that stupid element is going inside of there. I haven't, but they keep telling. I also want them to give me a right click open file location. I really would love that as well, like every other goddamn program in the world has. So, but that's it. So it could be that. Usually when you're starting to tell you element has been deleted in the file, what's going on, it's a permissions issue that Revit just can't figure out what the permissions are. It doesn't see that element because it doesn't see the permissions folder. Most of the time, that's, like I said, somebody deleted BA key before, or it's something like, hey, there was a glitch in your cache or something. Get rid of your cache and start over. Honest truth for me, I clear my cache, hence why I have a shortcut on the desktop. I clear my cache relatively often. Like you'll see that on here, these are all opened in the last few days. If I come in here and there's something opened last month, it's gone. I delete it. It's just one of those tools. And like I said, PyRevit does have a tool to do this if you start freaking out. The other thing I have found though, and this was as of like 21 or 2, I forget which, in the folder, the parent folder, you can see there's a CEF cache. I delete everything under here too. Because I've had clients, we go delete the cache, they open the file, still same issue. Delete the cache again, same issue. It's like, let's open the CEF cache, delete everything under there. I honestly have no idea what's in the CEF cache, but I have found that by deleting this, it then allows users to do it. So in that version of Revit, whatever it is, I go in, I delete the everything under the user's profile. Might as well keep the user, but if you don't want to, fine. But I delete collaboration cache, I delete everything under CEF cache, and I also delete everything under journals. Reason why I say this, and it doesn't do this as bad with BIM 360 projects, but every time you open up something in Revit that's non-BIM 360, it adds that file to the cache folder. I have seen this file be 90 gigs on people's computers for one version of Revit. So I also have a shortcut on my desktop that just goes through and deletes everything in this journals folder. As long as you don't have that version of Revit open, you're just fine to go in and shift delete. Everything's gone. Now I have an empty journals folder. And the reason why I say that, and I haven't seen it in recent years, but in old versions of Revit, if somebody went in and deleted the backup folder when it was on the server, I've still seen it freak out because it was like somehow extracting data out of the journal folder. When we deleted both, it was the same thing. So basically, clear out everything underneath those 3 folders and then try again. So I forget who asked that question, but where's the Teams cache? Somebody's like, where's the Teams cache? I didn't know
Yeah,
Teams had a
how do we
cache.
get rid of that crap?
Yeah, I was Googling something and it was like, wait, what? There's a cache for this? Oh, let's go to properties. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Data, Microsoft Teams cache. I will put that in the.
It makes sense, but I've never even thought about it.
Yeah, you start finding all the programs that have these crazy this, and you're like, wow, I should just clear that cache out occasionally. Cool. So what else we got, Melissa?
Let's see, we got that one done. Oh, and Jason, I'm just going to let you know I'm ignoring your IFC question right now because nobody wants to talk about IFC. Okay, just kidding. Would you like to talk about IFC? Jason had an IFC question on Twitter, apparently.
I basically explained to him what I said. More than likely, the person exporting out of the program they're exporting from has not mapped the IFC. And I don't know if you guys have ever attempted to do this, but in the exporting of Revit, I always don't even know if it's ever in here. When you export IFC, there's an IFC. Here it is, IFC options. I don't care what program you're in, you have to start mapping the elements you have to given categories, right? So if you start looking down here, there's certain IFC values that you want things to go to. More than likely, the client who's exporting it for JSON has everything under a generic model or something that Revit doesn't understand. So Revit brings that in. You could dump the IFC on BIM 360 and it will allow you to view the IFC on BIM 360 and as well select things and see their properties. So if you don't have an IFC, I know on Twitter people say, go download an IFC viewer, just dump it on BIM 360, it'll still work. But start looking at it. So you start seeing here, like this is just building element proxy. So none of these in Revit have ever been exported or set up to be IFC stuff.
Not gonna be helpful.
Right? Yeah, you have the option. So yeah, so somebody has to go through in the company who's doing it, and the problem is they might. And the problem is you have to spell. So if you like misspelled structural, like I did, hey, look, I'm gonna say go out as an IFC curtain wall. IFC is gonna say this doesn't exist. It's gonna put that stuff all as building proxy element, which is then come in, I believe, as a generic annotation. So more than likely, it's the export the person's doing. I also put in Twitter, I believe that there is an IFC. There's always Autodesk has an IFC in the App Store. Go look for the new IFC exporter, they call it, but it also helps import IFCs as well.
This is America. Do we use IFCs?
See, actually, was it? No, I don't think it was last Revit Radio. I was talking to a particular client that Jason, you're an MEP, so I don't know if this is the case, but there is a new file format that was, or new to me file format that the fabrication tools in Revit can import like an MLG or MG something file format. So if somebody's working in like CAD duct or CAD pipe, it can link out to that file format and the fabrication tools will bring that file format in. I have no idea how. I Googled it because I was with a client like, oh yeah, we're bringing in this file. I'm like, wait, what? What is that file type? I've never heard of this. And so they kind of walked me through it, and they were an MEP design firm, and they were bringing it in from the fabricators. I have no idea what that file type was, but something to look at. They're like, yeah, you just do it through the fabrication tools. I'm like, I don't know what tools. And I Googled it and it said it worked. I just, didn't ever try any of it. So theoretically, there's a way to bring that in from the Revit side as well. So if it's all MEP stuff, maybe you don't need the Revit, or you don't need the IFC. You can have them export to that file type.
So your official answer is go find this mystery file type and hope that works. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know what he's exactly looking for. My gut is telling me it's it was an architect. My gut is telling me it's the architect who's just exporting it wrong. All I got.
Yeah, then
What's
just
the next?
tell them they did it wrong. Everybody always takes that one.
You guys suck. Can you do it properly?
Okay, let's see. Here's one from Catlin saying, I haven't had time to research it much yet, other than I had a structural user notice the analytical stuff removed from the base Revit and now in the automation. In my testing, I was not able to get it to work with their dialogue, but worked fine when I ran it from within Revit.
Yeah, I haven't done too much on the analytical automation yet. I've done a little bit of it, but yes, in Revit 23, I think it was, they completely changed the analytical aspect of Revit for the structural engineers. Before you ever modeled a beam, it automatically had, hey, is there this enable analytical model, right? It was the stupidest thing ever, because even if an architect modeled a structural column, it was then analytical. If an architect put a foundation in, it was analytical. And all these analytical lines were automatically being generated, right? 5% of the United States market may be utilizing some part of the analytical model in Revit, but 95% of them aren't using it at all. And all that did was slow Revit down. Like even for the architects, I had a Dynamo script that would go in and turn off analytical for every structural type member because nobody was using it. A lot of times people are like, man, I don't get it. I moved this one wall in Revit, it takes forever. It's like, well, yeah, because that wall had analytical enabled or whatever. And now it's got to check everything else and not only move the 3D geometry, but also the analytical model. They've broken that. They've changed that. So now what you have up here is called your analytical model, and you can actually create and link things to an analytical model. There's all your structural settings are down here for your cases, combinations, etc. They did change this. It used to be one dialog box. Now it's like 3 or 4. So when you come inside of here, it still takes you to the same dialog box, but they added shortcuts for all 4 of them. Don't get it, same dialog as before. But what you can start doing is saying, ooh, I want to go create links, boundary conditions. I want to create a panel. A lot of this, what's cool is you could go create a member without ever having to do this. You could technically model a building now in Revit structure without any 3D geometry, just analytical elements. Once you do that, you could then even come see, ooh, I want to link this object to this analytical element. So if you did model these analytical elements in there, you then could click, hey, this column actually represents this analytical model as people come back and model it later. They've sped some of that up with the analytical automation. You can come in here and be like, oh, okay, what do we want to start analyzing? I've played with this a little bit. It's like, okay, cool. I was able to successfully get it in 23 when it came out. I have not played with it since then. I honestly don't even know. Analytical automation, where did it go? There it is. I was like, did it pop up on my 3rd screen that's back in Denver? So here's where it's saying, are you going to physical for buildings or analytical for buildings? So if you've already modeled the physical, theoretically, you click this one first. I'm sorry, analytical to physical. If you've clicked the physical side, so what I have here, I've modeled the physical things and I want to take it out to analytical models, then you do this. So they've created this little Dynamo script to come in here and do this. And then theoretically, it's going to come in, give you all of these options. I don't even remember what you have to set in here. You have to select the elements, select elements in Revit. We'll just do this. I gotta hold control. This. We'll do the beams, some of the beams. Sure, I didn't mean to click the floor, but sure, we'll do the floor, some of the beams. And then we'll say those are selected. Oh crap, I screwed that up. Screwed that up. Missing input. No, I'm just doing columns. Outputs, analytical members, false, false, true. I don't even remember. I was able to do this. I'd have to go back and look at this. Honest truth, I haven't used it because 0 of my clients are ever trying to use the analytical inside of Revit. I don't really remember. I know there's something in there. Analytical members, and then you hit run. Oh, somebody's saying you have to window select. I had done this before, just manually selecting, but like I said, here we go. Yeah, I still don't get the run. I think I'm missing something. Show elements, they're shown. I don't know what's going on, but maybe I don't have the maybe it's because I have the analytical turned off or something. I don't remember, but I've done it. It worked. It was then you can do it, or like I said, you can also come manually place a member. You're like, hey, I'm going to do an analytical member, top driven, whatever driven. But you can also just pick an element too. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and pick this column. Now I've got my analytical all the way down here, and then you can start doing it. Theoretically, they're doing this for other European markets because they all hated it, but in the US, like I said, 0 people are doing this for me, so I have not jumped into it. But yes, it did completely change in Revit 23. And you do have to work at it a little bit more. It's not just automatic, but theoretically you have more control, more freedom. So Caitlin, hopefully that answers your question. What other questions we got here?
We have a roof one from Ryan. So the modify sub elements for roofs and floors changed in 2023.1, which allows you to change elevation base to internal origin, survey point, current level, etc. It no longer is modifying it from its original location. On a large flat roof, however, if you are modifying slopes to drain, you no longer have the original location as an option, making it more difficult to quickly lay those out. Any ideas or thoughts on this? And the reason
Yeah, no, you don't.
complicated. Oh, sorry. There's an also. The reason roofs is more complicated is that the points on roof are offset the thickness of the roof, where floors you are already modifying the top. Okay, now go. Sorry.
I've noticed this too in 23.1. When you modify an elevation, they started changing that, I think, because of the topography and the new topo solids we have, that you have current level, survey, or origin, but you don't have what it used to be. So if I go back to current level, sure, this is perfect. The top of this slab is at the level. But if I were to cancel out of that one, I understand the 0, etc. But now I grab this one. Oh, it's sloping. I can't do that one because it's sloping, but let's just take this one and say we're 2 feet up or something. That's great. Now I say modify sub elements. I pick this and now we're at the 2 feet. So now I've got to start doing this math conversion. Yeah, I thought this was a horrible scenario for what they had. The height offset from level is my floor. So I now have to start subtracting all of this stuff. It drives me crazy, but that's how it's set up. And I believe they did that for topo solid, thinking, hey, you're going to know from the current level. So yeah, if you've got something that's offset already, or even like a finished floor that you'd offset a 1/2 inch, now you've got to start doing all the math. A little bit irritating for me, but that is how it is. And I don't understand why we don't have from relative position. Like, what's the relative top of that floor? I really wish we had that. Yeah, you're correct, Ryan. I agree. It's a pain in the ass.
So if you go in there on the elevation, can you do the little math trick?
You absolutely can do the math trips. If you're like, oh, I needed to move this down 1'3" and or 1'2" in 17/32. You can always do the equals and then come in the end and say, minus 1'2" and 17/32. But that really starts to suck.
That does suck.
Because now you're like, oh, that should have been this. So it does kind of suck for that to happen. But yeah, that is what it is. I wish I could tell you something different, but no, that's what it is. I think it's funny. Yeah. No, I was gonna say something, but it doesn't make sense. Never mind. Scratch that. Control Z.
Yeah, so that's a big sorry, that sucks. We commiserate with you, Ryan.
Commiserate, but yeah, there's not a way I know around it. And the worst part is, even if you put a spot elevation, you can't change it from a spot elevation. So you set your spot elevation up when you're doing the modify sub, you have to grab those points. Let's see, just out of curiosity, I want to see, before I say you can't do that, annotate spot elevation.
Can you do the one that shows the top and bottom?
Point. Well, I just want to do this one and change it to, yeah, but see, it's still relative. You've got to say relative to what level. So I'm still not even actually, I can just actual, not relative, actual. Yes, but it's still going to be something. But let's just say relative to, what is that, the roof level, I think, or 2? Sure, 0. Now if I do this and I say modify sub element and I pick that point, yeah, I can't use that dimension. I was wondering if that would work, because you pick the roof, you can, get that dimension to move the whole roof up or down. But it doesn't allow you to use that value to move the sub element. So sorry, Ryan, kind of a question, but really it was more of a, yep. That sucks.
Boo. Well, sorry. Every once in a while, there's small things like that that make me glad I'm still kind of stuck in 22, but there's a lot more stuff that's making me sad that I'm still stuck in 22. All right, well, I guess with our 30 whole minutes, we have one question. Well, from Jeremy, it says less of a question, maybe more of an observation I stumbled on earlier this week. Made a profile family using an ellipse. Used this profile in a railing family for the rails, top rail, and handrail. The rails displayed a seam along the length, but the top rail and handrail did not. Not a huge deal, but curious if you know how Revit thinks about these in the background that might explain the inconsistency. By the way, I made the profile families using bottom center, top center, etc., based on something you mentioned.
Should have had 23 open before I started this. I don't know if I've ever seen the seam in. This won't take too long to open in 24. I have not upgraded all of my stuff to 24 yet. Railing, sample railing.
I know I've seen it with round rails.
I don't know if I have. I'm trying to think on that because, yeah, there are some times in Revit where definitely with round, because it sees a circle as two arcs. Revit actually can't create a circle. If you've ever noticed, you draw a circle and then it's like two arcs most of the time. I think they've fixed that over the years, but in the old days, in the old profiles, you drew a circle using the circle command, you got two arcs. So if your profile is really old, I believe it still will display that. But it never did that with ellipses. So I'm trying to think, because with an ellipse, it's still one single entity. It's not two arcs. Yes, it's nothing. $23 open, finish it from this way. I'm not saying if it is anything, yes or no. I'm not, I'm just trying to put my head around it. Cause yeah, like in these ones, you can see that I've got like these around and there's not a line because I did redo my profile family from the one I had way back in the day to actually be a circle. Oh, let's just grab this one and let's change its profile. Oh, what is that using? Profile stay around TC engine. Down here to my profiles.
Looks like some of your rails are showing a line.
What was that?
Some of your horizontals look like they're showing a line.
That could be because of something else. So one thing for me that I've always done, you see, I don't have a round circle profile. Because ellipses can be circles if they're the same. Kind of like a rectangle can be a square, an ellipse can be a circle. So all of my stuff, I just call it round. Yeah, I'm not weird. So I'm not seeing it when it's used in a top rail, but I am seeing it when it's used in a rail sweep. So all of these are showing it because that's the rail sweep, right? So what I mean by that, if I go in and say edit family, right? The ones where you're seeing it are the rail structures. These are all using that profile. You're seeing it there. But if I come over here to that one, still not. One that had to be getting used somewhere else. But here, where it's a top rail or a handrail, you're not seeing it. Back on the bottom, not on the bottom. So yeah, I think it's kind of old school Revit stuff. It's still making that as two curves or something. But yeah, this one, it's a handrail, right? So if I, oops, let me cancel this. Let me grab the whole handrail. If I go into the type properties of this rail and we look at it, it's using a top rail or a handrail. I'm not sure which one. And that one is coming in and doing it there. So yes, you are correct. It is an observation, but if you use it in the rail structure, you're getting it, but not if it's a top rail or a handrail.
So I think that's because they gave us more goodies with top rails and handrails, but haven't really touched the non-continuous rails.
I think because top rails and handrails were new code and the rail structure was old code, and they probably just never changed it. It's a good observation. I think we just all screen capture that and send it to some people at Autodesk. Like same profile.
But
why is it working?
why?
Yeah, that's kind of funny. Very interesting. Let's see, let's change. I gotta define this. Sure. I don't know what this is using, so just so I don't have to go crazy. That's middle. Let's go to TC. I know you're gonna delete my dimensions. Yeah, so not on the top rail, only on the rail structure. So very good observation, Jeremy. You were correct. But if you really wanted to eliminate it, you were looking at something like this and it was only on the top, you could switch that out to be the top rail or the handrail and you would eliminate that same.
It's a feature.
But good on you for actually, yeah, sounds like a solid code theory. Yeah, I don't know, something where they did it way back when. But good on you for making different one profile that has different offsets on it. See, now I just blew you away also, Jeremy, because now you're gonna turn all your rounds into an ellipse. Yeah, you'll see. I have the same thing for like I have columns round.
Oh, Jeremy's already ahead of you.
I already had that. Yeah. I have columns that I call round columns, round sinks. They're not called circular. They're not called, circles. They're not circles. They can be either or. And again, if it's no different, then I'm just gonna add the profile family, but like my sinks do the same thing. And station categories, we'll just turn this on, right? I've got a width and a length. Yeah, well, there, because I gotta use diameter and radius, but I got diameter and radius here for vertical and horizontal. So same thing, it's like, oh, gee, I've got the diameter for horizontal. Again, if I make this something different, ooh, that's gonna be a tiny ellipse. There we go. Woo. So I always say ellipses can be circles. It's like a rectangle can be a square. Oh, nope. 3 minutes over. Well, thank you everyone for joining us in another session of Revit Radio. We should be back, and before I say that, let's actually look at a calendar. We should be back to an actual date in August. Let's see, August, that would be actually August 1st. I don't think there's anything going on August 1st. Is that some sort of holiday I am unaware of? Anyone? So we should be back to the first Tuesday of the month, with next month will be the first day of the month. So hopefully we'll see everybody back there. Again, tell your families, friends, enemies, coworkers, anybody else you need to lose profitability and killing billable hours. Let them all know. And we appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for all the questions. See ya, not next month, but the next Revit Radio. Thanks everyone.